Wang Lee. I'm the director of Edge on the Square, and I'd like to open our program with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land on which we stand is the ancestral and unceded lands of the unofficial people who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. We recognize the historic discrimination and violence inflicted upon indigenous peoples in California and the Americas. We also recognize the historical significance of this land to the diverse Chinese immigrant communities who have contributed to the rich cultural tapestry of San Francisco. We offer our deepest respect to the Ramatusha Ohlone as First Peoples and express gratitude to the generations of Chinese Americans who have made this community thrive. So welcome again to Edge on the Square. For how many of you, this is your first time to Edge? Some of you, great. Welcome. Okay, is this better? All right. So Edge on the Square is a contemporary arts and cultural hub dedicated to shifting the dominant stereotypical narrative about Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. We welcome API artists, storytellers, and cultural bearers to showcase their work here. And there's no better example than our program today about photographer Corky Lee. And we at Edge are honored to host the first book event for this book here in the Bay Area. So I'm delighted to introduce our moderator today, Mabel Chang. I can't quite remember when I first met you, because I think I knew you before I even met you. I think I might have seen you first in Jesse Jackson and the Rainbow Coalition as a bold Chinese woman standing alongside Jesse Jackson, fighting for solidarity, probably before we really knew what that meant, but you were there. So Mabel's held many titles as a San Francisco supervisor, assessor, executive director. She's a board member here at CNAC, the Chinatown Media and Arts Collaborative, who is our founding organization. But what's really important is that no matter what title she's wearing, Mabel has always been an activist, an organizer, a strategist, and a leader building API political power and narrative change. So please join me in welcoming Mabel.
I think we are among friends, and then I saw these 3 chairs set aside for the meeting. So welcome. Welcome everyone, and welcome to Edge on the Square. I want to give a special shout out to my fellow neighbor from Southern California, Yohan, and Kathy Hong Park coming across the bay to join us. So can you look around the room and find someone you don't know and say hi and I love you? And thank you for being out. I know you have a busy Saturday, and you're taking precious time to Chinatown. Means a great deal to me, and means a great deal to Chinatown. I would just say that I love Chinatown. This is my home. This is my home because it tells my soul. Whenever I want to cook, I think about what I think of Chinatown, things that I like to eat. And when I'm getting ready to, stand up and fight for our people, I think about Chinatown. How generations of people have fought here and left their mark in Chinatown. So before I dive right into it, I'd like to introduce all these wonderful photographers who are here. Our local Corky Lee, of course, Frank Zhang, who's here taking over. And Bob, thank you so much. You've been documenting for as long as I've known Chinatown, for as long as I have come to San Francisco. So thank you so much.
In the spirit.
It means a great deal that you are here. And Thank you so much for bringing all the books from East West Books. Woo! And this is something I want to share. I learned from the black churches, traveling with Jesse Jackson all these years. So Joanne, can we lock the doors? Nobody leave until they show their receipt. And we have all 3 books, at least 1 book. And I'm going to challenge if there is a great philanthropist here who might want to sponsor every single book on this table and give it away as a little goodie bag today. So we're going to lock the door until this happens. That's how we raise money. Thank you so much. We're going to dive right into what I'm here for. I'm here to kind of moderate and start a conversation between just 2 great people who means a lot to the collective soul and the collective power and the collective kindness of our community. So I'm going to introduce the 2 speakers today. To my left is Kathy Wang. Kathy is a poet, a writer, a scholar, and a Pulitzer finalist. She has one of the most powerful pens to influence people. She changes minds, and she empowered political muscles, and she empowered our souls collectively. Her most recent publication, Minor Feeling, is nothing but minor. It is about our soul and our courage and how we become who we are. So Kathy, thank you so much. And also available at these windows are also Kathy's other series of poems. She has published 3 volumes of poetry. She is a professor at UC Berkeley, and so for all the parents here, you can go home and ask your children, all the family, take the best class and try to get into Kathy's class. So thank you very much, Kathy. And to my right is Johan Lee. Johan is actually born John Lee. But Corky gave him that name Johan, and he's been using Johan ever since he was 12.
Well, 14 is still a long time.
So Johan is the 3rd son born to Chinese immigrant parents in the Mongolia, and that's where he learned all his spunkiness and creativity. Johan was by Corky's side as Corky photographed and organized in New York, Chinatown, until 1975, when he went to law school at USC. And in law school, he started to become active to help people who are victims of police brutality. And he has since become a justice lawyer, the people's lawyer in our community. He has been in private practice and a public defender in that realm in different parts of SoCal. And
South of Sabre, to the Pacific and to Colorado.
Okay. And now he is retired. We're going to contact him, right, Joanne? Legal counsel. Here. After now he's retired, he is full-time dad to 2 beautiful, brilliant girls, and Jasmine is here today. They drove from Houston.
I drove.
You drove.
She wanted it.
So, welcome very much. And I was told by my good friend, Ngai, who couldn't be here today because of a family emergency. But Ngai said, we will work with Corky to realize his dream through Johan, who is the executive of the Corky Lee estate because we want more swords against injustice. Injustice, we fight injustice so we could have a more just and inclusive America. So with that, I just want to welcome two speakers and everyone. As you start the conversation, I wanted to ask Wang to give us a little, to share a little bit who was Corky Lee and why is this book important to the community, to you, and to Corky?
This book is dedicated to the people of the AAPI community. It's not dedicated to mom and dad, which is a very good credit. My wife is very tolerant. My children who are more tolerant. But it is dedicated, I like to think of it as my brother's love letter to the AAPI community. In Corky passed, the procession was winding its way through the streets of Chinatown 2 years ago, and people were holding up signs. It said, Corky Lee loved. And Corky loved the community back. You can see it in his photographs. This book is Corky's way, my way, of saying how much he loved you, because he wanted to tell our story. And that's why this book has to be told, because he did it for as long as he did it. He did it out of pure passion and the belief that our stories had to be told, not by others, but by ourselves. Because for too long, he felt that things as basic as American history, we were excluded from. The photograph that we have over here next to Kathy is exactly the recognition of that injustice. If you look closely, it's populated by Asian faces. Okay? Because in the original photograph, we weren't there. He wanted everybody, all Americans, to know that we were there, we are here, and we will be here, and we are building the America of the future. That's why this book needed to be written. And I'm privileged, and I hope that this book will meet his expectations, and I know it will not, because I know my brother. Okay? But I hope it will meet our expectations of having our stories told by us.
And one more minute. In this book, the subtitle is Photographic Justice.
Hi.
When Corky was in, I think, junior high, he came back and said, showed me the original 1869 photograph. It's in black and white, and it depicts the completion of transcontinental railroad in 1869. There are no Chinese in that. Yet we all know, kind of sort of, all know that we were there. The entire western part of that railroad, in large part, could not have been built without Chinese laborers. Right? It was our forebears who were hanging off of baskets, off of sheer cliffs, planting explosives into the hill, into the cliff, and hoping that the guys above you would pull you up in time before the detonation went off. That's where the expression Chinese chance came from. Because, it was kind of chancy about whether or not you would be hit by the explosion. So, Corky said there weren't any Chinese in that original photograph. And it was an injustice because it took us out of the picture and said we weren't there any more than we weren't there when the Sacramento Delta was being drained by Chinese workers. The infrastructure of this state's economy rest upon the shoulders of Chinese and other Asian laborers. We got Chinese, we work with the Japanese, the Koreans, the Filipinos, etc., etc., etc. All happen to be people of color. It is an injustice to deprive people of their history. You have no history, as Malcolm X told us. People who do not know their history have no understanding of their current circumstances. Having no understanding of their current circumstances cannot plan a future. Corky wanted us to have a future. And he wanted to share that with all Americans, from wherever they came, from whatever part of the Asian landmass they came, whether it was Europe, Africa, what have you. Our stories need to be told. And Corky, for 50 years, told that story. And I'm honored that you're here to help celebrate it with you. And
And Kathy, you have written the endorsement of the book that Corky Lee put in the center of this frame working class women, children, and men, capturing their struggle and solidarity. Can you elaborate that and perhaps reconcile Corky's photo that shows these people and their struggle?
Yeah, sure. I mean, maybe I should first talk about where I'm from, right? And so I'm, I'm a recent Bay Area transplant. I was living in, is this working? Yeah, okay. But I was living in New York for 20 years before I came here, and I'm Korean American, and my parents came here in the 70s, so I'm second generation. And I would say, first of all, it's just incredible to just look at Corky Lee's archive and see that Asian Americans have been here for many generations before my parents arrived in America, not just working hard and being, which is sort of the common thread of Asian Americans, always worked hard, but that they were part of the struggle, that they were fighting that they were, for instance, there are photographs of the Japanese internment camp, right? And you hear about the Japanese internment camp, you hear about, the trainees exclusion act, you hear about the racism, but you never see representation, you never see photographs of Asian Americans protesting, demonstrating, fighting that. And that was absent to me. That was completely erased. That was not in the history books when I was in high school or when I was in college. Not that yet. I had to really seek it out too for that. And now we have this very comprehensive, beautiful book by Corky Lee that show empowering Asian Americans, really just fighting for equality, fighting for visibility, fighting for solidarity, and it's really, I think it's so important. There's so few documentaries actually doing that, representing that. Now we have the evidence. It's like you hear stories about how Asian Americans in the late 60s joined up with the Black Power movement, and we're also anti-imperialists, anti-war, fought for Asian American visibility, all of that. And we have photographs by Corky Lee, and he's been absolutely tireless. And it really is just incredible to just see that in photo form, It's also just interesting because it's like, I'm originally from LA, and I'm originally from LA, and even when I was living in New York, it was like the Asians that I was most exposed to are like just first generation immigrants, or as Korean immigrants, or would have, and I think that's just sort of the American assumption about Asians in America, is that they're always new immigrants, they're new arrivals. We're like that, either they're like working nail salons and dry cleaners, or they're in Silicon Valley, you know, and but we never, there's not as much visibility of the Asian Americans, especially Chinese Americans, Filipinos, and Japanese Americans who've been here for like 3, 4, 5 generations, you know, and it's like, it's really also really cool to see all these like, you know, protesters, Chinese American protesters from the 70s who were like, it feels very contemporary. I'm like, oh wait, this is like, these are like Asian Americans now. So like when Corky Lee passed tragically during COVID, it was like, that was when I was living in New York at the time. And that was when there was this spike in the and, you know, and there are all these like young Asian Americans, like millennials and Gen Zers, who were standing up for the rights of, to protect their elders. And, you know, in Chinatown in New York, where I used to live, you know, where Corky Lee took a lot of photographs, of course, you know, you see these young kids like have so forth, like they're fighting and struggling for against anti-Asian, against Asian hate and protecting their elders. And I'm like, they're just like, you know, carrying on that baton. That's what we had. And we assumed that it didn't have antecedents, when in fact they did. And it was from these activists like Corky Lee, who deserves and needs so much recognition.
Do you want to elaborate a little more on how Corky centered many of his photo documentation on working class men and women? What have you seen?
Well, I think what was really, you know, it's just like this for me every day. Like, you know, he has portraits of Chinatown, like kind of the tenement buildings, and you know, there's like one of the photographs that I'm going to buy. It's like this one fire escape, and it's just like these 2 boys, one wearing glasses, one's not wearing glasses. And they're just like standing there, and it's just, they look so confident, and you know, they look so confident. And it was just like, I don't know, it was just nice. It's nice to see this kind of slice of life. But then there are other photographs, like for instance, you know, when for instance, garment workers, right? So you see garment workers in photographs of a mother working in front of her sewing machine, and there's her kid right there, working just like the labor school and so forth. And that's another example. It's really great to see it. And you also think about how much, you know, there's how much has come in the past and how much it hasn't. And I think about like my own family, my extended family, when they were working like cleaners and stuff, and have kids who just oh, okay. Okay. Does that work?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Okay, that's much louder. Anyway, I was just going to say you have these really portraits of labor and family. So, which photographs are you most of?
I like the, it really hit me when I saw all the garden workers on strike.
Yeah.
Also, my sister was organizer at the garden workers around the time. Turning over to Johan. So Corky photographed not just the struggles that the community was involved in. He also photographed heritage festivals and everyday life. What can we learn from these photographs as you reflect on them?
Corky had this sense that our cultural traditions and celebrations were more than just quaint. They appear quaint to the unpracticed eye. But when you explain that to the viewers, you see that there's a certain majesty and a strength. For instance, the photograph to my left, your right, the one in the vertical, with the triangular building in the background, okay. That's a photograph of a, I'm always mispronouncing the name. It's a Filipino dance group in New York. That is a group which is not just a cultural organization, but they're also engaged. They're based in the Mindanao province of the Philippines, and as you may know, they have a unique background. It's predominantly Muslim in their religion, and they've been for years engaged in a struggle to develop some sort of economy with the Philippine government in Manila. But there's just an absolute majesty that comes through. And another thing which is very remarkable is that, well, Corky's going to hate me for this, but this woman in the middle here, her name is Poetry. She's a nurse. She was literally on the front line of fighting COVID during the pandemic. She also attended to my brother in the last case. And coincidentally, also my sister-in-law in 2000, and she was in the hospital, and she was passed of breast cancer. Corky had this way of, finding these people and connecting with these people. And you see the majesty and the strength of these people. And that's the one thing that comes through in many of the photographs. I don't have that one, well, the one behind us here. The Sikh photograph, that photograph, I'm sure many of you may have already seen it in other settings. That is a photograph that speaks to the strength of the Sikh community, who, in spite of the vicious attacks that they were experiencing in the wake of 9/11, the majesty and it says something more than just we are Sikhs. We are human. We love this country too. Right? This photograph, again, one of the first photographs, one of the demonstrators. This was at the POU demonstration back in 75? Was it that evening? Now, there's another photograph. We call it the chain gang. Several of you may have also seen it. It's a group of young men and a woman who have arms linked. That photograph, let me tell you the story about that. That photograph was taken in response to the massing of New York City police officers that were attempting to break up the march that this gentleman was coming from. Because they saw that the police were massing in front of this, and behind this group of young men with their arms linked were the rest of the demonstrators. There are accounts of perhaps 15, 20, as many as 20,000, one of the largest demonstrations that New York City saw. And New York City, you can imagine, has seen lots of large demonstrations. That group of youngsters, well, I call them youngsters, I'm not a youngster anymore. That group of youngsters who were no older than their 20, 25. And they linked arms because they were afraid that the mass of police were going to attack the other demonstrators behind them, which were men and women, moms and dads, aunts and uncles, and young children who had also come to demonstrate against nationality that was visited by Mr. Yu. Okay. In the course of working on the book, we learned that 3 of those 4 men are no longer with us. One is still around. I understand he's a practicing physician, cardiologist, I believe, and then he did well. Right? The others are no longer with us. The woman, I believe, is still with us. But Corky had this way of showing us in ways that we never even imagined for ourselves. I mean, how many of us can imagine my mom as a garment worker? Is that correct? How many of us can imagine ourselves doing that? Protesting for every study. Protesting that our stories need to be told. We wanted to find out our stories through our eyes. Because our parents would always tell us our stories. For any number of good reasons. They didn't imagine. But that was the genius that my brother had. He was able to reach that universal humanity that transcends color, transcends nationality, transcends ethnicity. And that's why he did that.
Let's take a look at the topic of stereotype and ethnic pride. Asian women, Asian men have always been stereotyped in a certain way. So, questions for both Kathy and Johan. Can you think about how these photographs that Corky has taken help to break down stereotype and help to build that?
Well, I think, what I was saying before is that you see the evidence, you see the archive of a movement, a movement of Asian Americans who fought for disability, equity, and that's been completely erased. And, I think really the stereotype that his photographs probably come out the most, this term is, I think we're Asian Americans is not a minority, that they immigrated here to keep their heads down and work hard and not, what is that? Is it if you, nail sticks out?
Yeah, the nail that sticks out is the one that's struck.
Yeah.
Or something to that.
When it gets a
Sounds
hammer.
better, Jack.
The nail that sticks out gets the hammer. And so, and it's not entirely untrue. I would say that with my parents at least, even though my father was in a lot of student movements in South Korea when they were here, because they were first generation immigrants, they were more interested in just getting by in survival. So you're not going to be that nail that's going to stick out. So really what's crucial about Corky Lee's photographs is that we saw generations of Asian Americans who really stood out, who really used their voices and, and were, refused to be the minority. And they were there protesting the murder of Vincent Chee. You also see, and it's also remarkable that Corky Lee had this very flexible definition of Asian American, when even there were a lot of people, probably never than who were very reticent or resistant to Asian America as a political alliance. They were thinking, a lot of people thought, okay, that's a label, that's an identity label, that's like a box that someone's putting me into, but it just was very artificial. And he early on, he recognized that Asian American was like a pan-Asian community who had to be foreground the most vulnerable people. And he did that. You know, he started with the Chinese American community by foreground and putting into centering the garment workers, the working class. And then he did that, with Korean Americans, right? Like when he took photographs of the tensions between Koreans and Black Americans during the Los Angeles riots. And he did that during 9/11, right? Which people have already forgotten, right? How, after 9/11, there was a lot of anti-Muslim hate. And, he documented the Sikh community who rose up and protested and everything. So he was there, and his definition of Asian America seemed to just grow and become more, expansive as he throughout his career as a photographer. And also I really admired that he was everywhere. Like wherever there was any kind of march, he was there taking photos, which I learned from reading the monograph. But it's also really great to see how he was there advocating and bringing visibility to arts organizations too, like Asian American Writers Workshop, the Basement Workshop, Godzilla, all of that, And so, yeah, he was like he was a photographer, an artist, and just like a historian who was doing the work of, dozens of historians.
And Johan, would you like to add a little more? How was Corky involved with the various art and cultural groups in New York?
Well, somewhere along the line, I told about 501c3, which those of you familiar will recognize that's an Internal Revenue Service designation for nonprofit organizations. And unbeknownst to me, until we passed, I didn't realize that he'd actually helped establish many of them. He helped set up the Filipino group, the AAPI. There was one of the last organizations he helped set up was an organization based out of 29 Bell Street in New York City, Chinatown, Center for Media Awareness. Okay. So if you were to look through the charters of 501c3 organizations that my brother's signature appears in a lot of the charter papers. He believed that, we needed something more than the flower song. Okay. Nancy Kwan was a lovely lady, but, all right, he was always ready to answer her question. It was, again, part of his overall thing that he wanted us to be accurately presented. And the only ones who ultimately are responsible for that is going to be ourselves. I've heard people talk about, people always take pictures of Chinatown. They're always taking pictures of Koreatown, Little Tokyo, what happened. But taken by outsiders. Right? The beauty of Corky was that he was one of us, taking pictures of us. Okay? And he had the sensitivity so that when he went to other Asian communities, when he went to the Sikh community, he went to the Filipino community, because he was looking through their eyes. He was looking through our eyes. And that's very important. That's very important because that gives us meaning. It tells us we are worthy of mention. And we are. And then Beyond that, we start realizing that when African American railroad workers, railroad porters were trying to organize, who did they bring in? Who did the railroad bring in? They brought in Filipinos. Why? Because they wanted strike breakers. So, what did the Filipinos and the blacks decide to do? They started talking to one another. They said, well, the only difference between us is really the color of skin. Other than that, our economic, our economics questions, issues are the same. So, go together. All right? Caesar Chavez comes along. He's having a hard time organizing, the farm workers because at that point in time, perhaps even now, a lot of farm workers were of Filipino descent. And they were Chicano farm workers. They're the sailors, okay? And one of Caesar Chavez's advisors said, "Let's talk to the Filipinos." And he did. And what do we have? We have UFW now. So we were a successful union. That's because we started talking to one, we started seeing each other, we started working together and with others. So we realized the commonalities. If we realize our commonalities, we can do anything. Okay? And that is, again, one thing that was always quiet. Another thing I really admire about my brother, there was a period of time that was a very political person. There was a great deal of debate, polemics, and whatnot within certain segments of the Asian American community. Some of us went rather extreme. Corky never did. He never did. Recently, there was a street named after Corky in China, University of China, Corky Lee. It's on the corner of Mott and Corky Lee next to the Transfiguration Catholic Church. And I was asked to speak at that commemoration and realized, way, what is the way? And I realized that Corky's way was to find the commonalities of all of us so that we can work better and become better. The interesting thing about Corky Way is that the street is actually codenamed after a gentleman named Frank Moscow. Mr. Moscow was an Italian American, was an Italian descent, and he, in his lifetime, was also a community activist. And I think it's really fitting that the two men share that short little street, it's only 1 block long, but there's a great dumpling shop on it, so the next time you're in Chinatown, check it out, okay? And they're cheap too. That's the Corky way, finding a way, recognizing the commonality, denying the extremes, so that we can actually work progressively and work together.
Thank you. We come towards the end of the conversation, so I'm going to ask both speakers to make some concluding remarks. But I wanted to ask a question to Kathy. What do you think is Corky's legacy? The legacy to his collection of photographs, and what is the relevance of these photographs to the new generation, to the young people? How can we continue his way, and how can we continue his street?
Well, I mean, Asian Americans are the fastest growing minority group in the U.S. Right now, we're at 6%. We're going to be double that, soon enough by sometime in 2050. Minorities will also be the majority in 2050. It doesn't mean that we're going to live in an equal society and that it's going to be less racist or less capitalist or anything, but that is sort of demographically where we're going. And so, I'm seeing already his influence now. I think there are more Asian Americans, and also since 1965, there's also a greater variety of Asian Americans. Like there's now Koreans, there are Bangladeshis, Cambodians, Vietnamese, and so forth. And so I think there's always this question. You know, I'm a professor. I've also done a lot of talks, and you know, there's a lot of anxiety among Gen Z, Asian Americans. They're just like, what is the world that we're inheriting? Why are we inheriting this world? Why? What are we? And they're really trying to find themselves in the world, and they're also, I think, much more politically aware and angrier and empowered and confident than my generation was. You know, I'm part of the Gen X, I guess you could say, generation. And so there's so much, like in Berkeley, for instance, there's so much, there's so much energy around political struggle. Right now, it's about Gaza, right, and the Palestinians who are being massacred in Gaza, and I see a lot of Asian Americans who are in the encampments, who are fighting against this genocidal violence, and it's really heartening to see, and I think this younger generation is so much wiser than everyone. So many people who are in power right now, people who are boomers, you know, my generation and so forth. But they're always looking for antecedents, as I was saying. They're looking for predators. They're like, so it's like, you know, Grayson Boggs, Yuri Kochiyama, and Corky Lee. And, you know, to know that there were people, other fearless advocates, fearless crusaders before them, makes this younger generation less alone, that they have a right to this, that they have inherited this struggle. And, you know, and it's so I think that there's the millennials, the Gen Xers, the Gen Zers, who I think are very fierce right now, are very much indebted to Corky Lee.
Thank you. So before we close the formal part of the conversation, so we can all engage with Yohan and Kathy individually, I'm going to ask our speaker to make some concluding remarks, including your favorite moment with the book, your favorite memories of Corky, and your personal aspiration for this book, and how do we want to promote this book from here on?
One, Bible. But more and more, the environment, share. Corky gave us something we didn't have before. He gave us a narrative, a pictorial narrative of who we are, what we are, what we can be. Corky and I sometimes talk about this concept of aging as being the eternal farm, because you meet an African American, or if you meet a person of African descent, a lot of us will assume he or she is a citizen because, by virtue of the 14th Amendment, they are. But one of the curious things about being Asian is that my daughter, who was born in La Jolla, California, is always going to be asked where you're from. And we all know what that means, right? It means Japanese, Korean, Filipino, what have you. Corky wanted us to be Americans, and we are Americans. My Chinese is horrible. I dropped out of Chinese school in 3rd grade, 4th grade. People laugh when I order in a Chinese restaurant. But when I walked into a courtroom, an outlying courtroom in Southern California, and he asked, you must be the Chinese interpreter that we asked for. Okay. No, I'm still a lawyer. Yeah. Change those definitions. Corky gave us the means to my kids, your kids, our grandkids, right? We have the means now to say more than that. And because of people like Corky, and Corky was unique. I have a hard time thinking of being part of a pantheon, right? Because he's always going to be my brother first. But we have now, in 2023, a blueprint review laid out by people like my brother. Some of who have passed in the last couple of years we've lost. You know, I know two friends that we've lost, and really great activists. Robert Yagida, I don't know if you know of Takashi. He was with us in Confucius Plaza and Peter Yu back in the day. And Don Lee, who was a little younger, recently passed away. He was a great community activist in New York City, China. And I got to know him well for the last 2 years. But he was a good among men. And those of us who have just that little bit of experience, right? Maybe not as much as Corky, maybe not as much as I, maybe more than I, right? And we need to share what we know, because that will make our kids, our grandkids, and our posterity and this nation much better and much truer to the promise that it is. You have questions?
Kathy is going to make some concluding reflections, and then we'll.
I would love to just hear questions, Actually, can I ask use my concluding comment to ask a question to you?
Okay, so we're going to call on Jane.
Okay.
Well, actually, I just want to go on to expand on Corky's involvement with the American Legion in Chinatown, New York, because I thought that was really instrumental in showing his intersections with the older population as well as his respect for workers
Our dad was a World War II vet. Now, he came to the States in 1925. He was drafted in 1943, and they wanted to make him a cook. Luckily for my dad, he had gotten some training as a welder in Philadelphia shipyards. And he said, I don't want to cook. I'm a welder. And they said, you're not a welder. He proved that he was a welder. So, the military intelligence, being what it is, they decided to send him back to China instead of the 14th Air Force in China. He was a veteran. My brother, Chee, was also a Vietnam veteran. So, our family has ties with the U.S. military, with military service. And he was very proud of it. We were very proud of it. Because when they discharged my dad in 1945, he came out as a technical sergeant, which is not bad considering he had all 3 years of formal education in China and no formal education here in the States. Okay. Corky realized that there were a lot, literally thousands, of veterans like my dad who had quietly served and hardly anybody knew about. And so he developed ties with the American Legion. They ultimately inducted him into the American Legion as an auxiliary of some sort. I never quite got it. But he was very proud of that because he was proud of our family service, Jimmy's service, and my dad's service. And again, another chapter of Asian American history that is so celebrated. have my dad's congressional medal, right here in the mantelpiece in our family. So, you know, that's how he came, and he helped champion that whole campaign. And if any of you know a Chinese American veteran who didn't get their medal yet, there's still time. And I also might add, there's a parallel program for Filipino American veterans who recently got to the thanks of the U.S. Congress for getting in Ngai. Those are the one, but sorry.
Question for Kathy. Oh, sorry. This country is not very kind for our artists. How do you make a living?
He was very frugal. He was very frugal, and he had, you know, Corky was blessed by having a very good friends. He would never ask. You would literally have to stuff it down his throat. And he was so focused on his mission that the other stuff didn't terribly matter. He was, in one sense, he was a very fortunate person because people would give to him generously and frequently. And Marshall was pretty good care of him. I spoke to his brother-in-law, Marge's surviving brother, and I asked Corky, he said, "You're all right." He said, "Why don't you care of him?" I do know that he went to the way and he was very frugal, just the way our parents raised us.
I have a question, actually, to you on that I want to ask. Both of you are activists, you know, the public defender, you were a public defender, and he was, you know, he documented all these different protest movements. And I'm just wondering, like, what were the family dinners like? Why? How did your family end up raising two very, you know, conscientious, opinionated, sons?
Well, I think Corky is characterized as non-traditional. Okay? My parents wanted Corky to be a doctor. My dad was too disappointed that I went to middle school. But he was typical immigrant generation dad. He didn't exactly share that with us. I found out after my dad had passed away that my dad had gotten into the habit of carrying a bunch of my business cards and a bunch of Corky's business cards, and my dad would quietly pass it around. And he would tell people that this is my son, he's a photographer. My son, he's a lawyer. Okay. My mom never mentioned it. My dad never mentioned it. I had to find out after both of them had passed. from my alright, so like, yeah, we always go around Chinatown, hey, we got the cars. Yeah, had to get the cars. I said, oh, okay. So I guess it's all as good as the end. My dad didn't want to say he was aware of the miraculous. And he was aware that we were doing things that he did not necessarily approve of. But I also sensed from him that it wasn't because he disapproved of what we were doing, it was because of the danger that was involved in doing it. Because there was a period when some of the things we were doing would cause us to be subject to physical harm. And I remember one mentioned that. He mentioned this particular demonstration that had recently taken place. And he said, the demonstration was getting kind of rowdy. Somebody could have gotten hurt. Somebody could have. He said, and his response was, well, sometimes you just gotta stand up and do it another time. That's what we left it. If you ever had a Chinese dad, or an immigrant dad, that's the way they talk. That's the code. They won't say you done good, all right? It's just that, you done right. That's the most you'll ever get.
So first of all, Johan, congratulations on this achievement. I feel like I knew all of these photographs, but just looking through the books now, I am struck by the passion and also the artistry. It feels like he's referencing images from the past. And I feel like that mother and daughter, like feeling, he's really thinking carefully about composition. So I'm curious, are there plans for larger exhibitions in conjunction with the book? How else can we share Corky's artistry and with the larger artistic community?
Well, Chee, who is the photographic editor of the book, right? Chee, being an artist in his own right, has visions of how many other things can come out of this body of work. And I totally agree with you. You could do a art critique of it. If you follow, and I don't tend to be an art critic of any sort, but you can see its progression. Right? There are certain photographs in the book which are deliberately posed and created. And there's photographs which, if you're in the book, they're actually part of the series. And those are just incredible fodder. There are so many books out of his hundreds of thousands of images that can be generated. We license them out for textbooks. The Obama Center has been granted permission to use one of Corky's photographs, which I thought was fantastic. And, I just wish my brother would be able to celebrate it also, because we had a conversation. Wouldn't it be nice if you had an Obama Center, and there it is. It's going to be there. It's going to be part of the reading montage, as I understand it. So there's a lot more books in there. Whether or not they'll be, authored by the same team or organized by the same team, that remains to be seen. But people who have that knowledge, who have a plan, contact us.
I was just going to also say that one thing that wasn't addressed in this conversation is, and that I learned from reading the monograph, is how he was really the margins of photojournalism. So I didn't notice that a lot of photographs he took were he just did them. It wasn't like he was on assignment for the New York Times or New York Post or any of these newspapers, and he would try to sell his photographs, and it seemed like most of the time that magazines and newspapers weren't interested because it was Asian Americans were invisible, they just didn't have any interest, and it was surprising to find out that I was reading, and again, it was in the monograph, that there was Asian American Journalists Association where they were, I think you could be a member, but you had to have a salary, you had to earn most of your money from your photographs to be part of it, and he asked to be part of the Asian American Association. The reason why he wasn't was because he wasn't making actually any money from his photographs. His photographs were not sellable, probably because of the subject matter and the issues that he was interested in. And I thought that was interesting that he was sort of always on the margins of photojournalism and also, I guess, like, fine arts photography, or, you know, I don't think, he wasn't interested in fine arts photography.
No, but,
Yeah.
that essay was written by Tiwa. And Tiwa and our family go back 50 years now. Okay. Corky was one of the founding members of AAPI. And the irony was that for the first several years, he wasn't even eligible to be a member because he did not make a living from his photojournalism. And when Tiwa realized this, Tiwa became the president of AAPI and had the bylaws changed. So, you know, and because I remember, I heard the stories from both Corky and from Tiwa. And Tiwa, one of the proudest things that Tiwa has done in Belgium is that he helped make Corky a full-fledged member of the AAPI. So, and they did great.
Well, thank you. I think we have come to the best part of the program today, which is dessert time. So we're going to end the formal part of the conversation, and I want to thank both speakers, Kathy and Johan, sharing all the insight and leaving us with courage. And we talked about the what generation now? The Z, being very fierce, you know, they are fearless, which is an inspiration, and Corky being, you know, nimble and always finding new ways. So I before we break for dessert, I want to thank Joanne and the Edge on the Square staff, Candace, Erica, Linda, Elaine, many more. So, and I just want to say I learned a lot from the conversation. And it reminds me that to share with everybody here, to really love yourself, because if you love yourself, you're going to be healthy and you're going to live long. We need a lot of oomph to fight white supremacy, to fight all the injustice as part of the capitalist system. So be good to yourself, eat healthy, and live a long, healthy life so we could gather all our collective energy and our minds. Edge of the Square would like you to think this is your home in Chinatown. So whenever you come by and say hello to Joanne and the team, and I hope I'm also here to welcome you back. This is a building that we purchased with support from the state legislature, and in particular directed by Assemblyman Tang and supported by Governor Newsom. But we are still short 35 million, right, Joanne? By the time we fix it up, there will be 20,000 square feet. But now there's only like about 3,000 square feet to be used. So a lot of work needs to be done, and we invite you, welcome you, and we would love you to be part of this team to build the edge. We're calling ourselves the Edge on the Square because we are on the edge of Portsmouth Square, which is the living room of Chinatown. We are also always on edge. We want to do better, and we want to be on edge with you. So welcome again, and I'm going to turn it back to Joanne, our fearless executive director, who's going to lead us to rebuild this amazing building.
Well, thank you, Mabel. Let's give a big hand to Mabel. Our desserts, our panelists are here. end is ready for your purchases. I think there's book signing. So we're gonna move some chairs and set up a table, I think, and there'll be book signing. Come on up and you'll see not only do we have Corky Lee's book, we have Kathy's book and a few other Asian American youth books. They look super interesting. So come on up. Thanks, everybody.